Welcome back to Paul Murray Live. I'm delighted to say that joining me now is Liberal Senator Holly Hughes and Leisa Goddard from Adoni Media. Well, welcome for our final segment of the night, and I tell you what, we've saved some of the best till last. Let's go to Queensland. It's getting worse and worse for Anastasia Palaszczuk. A former media advisor to the government has alleged she was forced out of the job after raising concerns about unethical, immoral and at times potentially illegal behaviour. Now, Leisa, there's all this pressure on in Queensland. We've covered a little bit of this earlier, but shouldn't there be more pressure on the government by both the opposition, the media, and of course this Triple C?
Yeah, Corey, you're absolutely right. And we've seen the media slightly pick up the pressure a bit today, but it's certainly been the Courier Mail that has led the charge on this one, and rightly so. And hopefully over the next few days, we'll continue to see the pressure mount on the government because, quite frankly, it is not good enough. You now have an announcement that will have a commission of inquiry into just the Triple C. And as you've discussed earlier in the program, that's only part of the problem here in this state. So, thanks to the Fitzgerald inquiry, the first one, not the 2.0 version that we're in for now, we were known as the Moonlight State. Well, they say sunlight is the best form of disinfectant. Well, at the moment, all Palaszczuk is doing is giving us a small ray of sunshine and focusing just on the Triple C. What we need to have is the sunshine across all of it. So we look at what's happening within the Integrity Commission, what's happening with the fact that the Integrity Commissioner has decided to stand down from her job halfway through her second term because she alleges that a laptop was seized and what was on it was wiped. So what is that? This inquiry that the Premier has announced won't answer that question. It won't even probe into any of that. Then you've got a former state archivist who's stood down and he's basically said, look, there has been huge questions around the integrity, about pressure being put on public servants. And in fact, he took to LinkedIn today and wrote a piece, and I'll quote it, Corey. He says, they, being the public servants, know if it causes political damage, there will be a potential consequence. Essentially, if you're a good boy or girl, you get to keep your job. Now, I'm sorry, no state nor territory in this country should there be a public servant that's holding a job and fearful of giving good advice, otherwise losing their job because it's going to potentially cause some sort of political damage. I just think it is time that the Premier stands up, doesn't try to do a look over here, and actually opens up a full inquiry like the opposition and many others are calling for.
Yeah, Leisa, I agree with you, but Senator, this is a problem in politics, isn't it? We know that there's retribution that happens in the Labor Party more often than the Liberal Party, but you've got to be a good boy or girl to keep your job. But why have all the people who say there should be a federal ICAC remaining so silent on the lack of integrity and accountability in a state like Queensland or Victoria for that matter?
The idea around the federal ICAC, and what I find so interesting with that is that fundamentally when you go to federal parliament, the ability for there to be corruption is very little because the decisions are not made around things like roads, rates, rubbish, zoning permits, where land's being allocated. Those decisions aren't at a federal level. They're more at a state and local government level. And that's where in the past we've traditionally seen problems arise. But what Premier Palaszczuk has done today is what she's done consistently through this entire pandemic and been on display for all Australians to see. She lacks any empathy. She absolutely runs her own game in line with what she sees as politically expedient. This is nothing but deflection. And I do hope Tony Fitzgerald, after his very successful first inquiry, does stand up around this. But if you look at the time frame as well, it's very politically convenient for them that there's a 6-month time frame for this inquiry, well outside of when the federal election's going to be held. So even if it did open up and look at what's happening in Queensland parliamentary circles, which I think it should, it's going to be outside the federal parliament election, which is probably where we need to have a look at how Labor actually runs things when they're in power. We're under a Westminster system. Frank and fearless of the public service is actually what we'd like to see. I know, Corey, you understand as a member of a Conservative government, that's not always the case because the Public Service Union isn't necessarily a great fan of Conservative governments. But frank and fearless, if you can't be that under a Labor government with a massive public sector union, I don't know when you can be.
So, sorry, Holly, I just lost you there, but as a member of the government, it is the master of understatement to think that you're not always getting the best advice from the public servants. It's quite incredible. Look, can I ask you about this? When Biden said the next Supreme Court justice would be a black woman, it was incredulous because, I mean, after all, shouldn't they be choosing the best person for the job? Holly, that is what it is all meant to be. These people are making the rules for the law of the land. Should they choose the best person for the job, or identity politics prevailing?
Absolutely not identity woke politics. We're talking about a lifetime appointment of someone who is making incredibly vital judicial decisions. The way that the US Supreme Court sits over so much of what happens in the United States going forward, when they bring any laws, whether it's go back to Roe v. Wade, that is such a defining piece of Supreme Court ruling that's overseen so much that happens in the US. And I'm pretty sure there was no one put on that panel because they tick some sort of woke box. I mean, if a black woman happens to be the best person in judicial circles, great. But we need, in any appointment that is particularly a lifetime appointment,
exactly.
It should be the best person for the job, regardless what gender they are and regardless what colour they are. They should be smart, they should be fair.
I hate to interrupt, but I've got someone in my ear saying, I've got to go because I'm out of time. So, Leisa, Senator Holly Hughes, thank you so much for your time tonight. I'm sorry it was so brief. We'll have another opportunity. But you stay with us at home on Sky right now because coming up is the one and only Rita Panahi. Thanks for your company tonight. It's been my pleasure. Good night.